Hey everybody, we're back with the KrakCast News. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Josh and Dr. Mike on a strangely cool and breezy July afternoon. We often start talking about the weather. Guys, it's a bit odd. It feels like April, September, something like that.
Feels like a police summer.
Didn't we have proper summer like 2 days ago for 12 hours? Or something
well, no,
like
we did have a week of like above 30 degrees, so I suppose it was enough to get people complaining.
I was woken up this morning because I felt, I had my window open, I felt this cold breeze on my leg. I realized I kicked my covers off or something. It was too cold to be comfortable, and this is in the middle of July, so that's just,
and it wasn't air conditioning.
Just a bit odd. It was not air conditioning. No. Well, anyway, let's dive into the news headlines we've picked this week in no particular order, except for the order on which I have them written down on my little piece of paper here.
We
spoke about this, I think, 3 weeks ago.
End quote. Repeat last line.
The decision of the American and Polish governments to set up a permanent base here in Poland for American soldiers, as opposed to what we've had until now, which is, I forgot the term they use for it. It's like a rotating, kind of semi-permanent,
peripatetic,
temporary, kind of not really, sort of, but. Anyway, they're going to formalize it and they're going to seal the deal and make it an official permanent thing now. As many as 10,000 U.S. soldiers expected to be stationed on this base, which is near Poznan, small place, I forgot the name, doesn't matter, but close to Poznan. We learned this week that in a survey conducted by Rzeczpospolita, big business daily, nearly 90%, 87.5% of respondents approved or are somehow happy about this development. Guys, this is odd in a world of Yankee go home and, why are you sticking your nose in our business and blah, 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 that almost 90% of Poles support the presence of a fairly significant U.S. military presence here. Dr. Mike, I'll start with you. How do you explain this European schizophrenia?
Well, I think the schizophrenia is there mainly because of the way it's reported to us. It's the people that whine and complain the loudest that we hear about, the blue-haired pronoun gang.
All right, careful now.
That say, yes, the world is ending, we need to get rid of Americans, go vegan, etc. But it's like day-to-day people that actually have
You were all over the place. Go vegan? What? Okay, anyway, just go on.
Like I said, whatever, blue-haired freaks.
Not only, come on, it's not only like, you're cliched, stereotypical leftist. There are lots of people in the mainstream who, would object to this. But I was expecting an answer somewhere in the range of 50 to 60%.
I mean, we just have to remember the tirade of abuse we got when we kind of said some vaguely complimentary things about McDonald's a few dozen episodes back.
Tools of the capitalist man.
Yeah. But while you were talking, I was thinking, what exactly was the question in the survey? I mean, if it was something like, so, given the choice of a permanent Russian garrison in Poland or a permanent US garrison in Poland, which would you be more satisfied by? Then I think that you'd probably see a figure approaching 99.9% of Poles would welcome a US.
Which of these would you be less unsatisfied by?
Like try and avoid double negatives. It really confuses.
I just find it odd. I mean, obviously opinions vary all over the continent, and as far as we can generalize about this kind of thing, Poland would be more sympathetic to American interests and partnership with Americans than others. But this just strikes me as bizarre, and this is the highest it's ever going to be. By the way, it's only going to get lower from now as the reality of this kind of commitment makes itself obvious in the form of, well, just ask the Japanese how their bases on the American bases on Okinawa go. Well, for me, I think they're going to have a similar situation here.
I think the biggest issue there is noise pollution. I mean, I wouldn't want to have a military base next door to me anyway. So with jet fighters, sonic booms, etc. Though if they have a U.S. base here, they'll finally reopen Taco Bell's. I mean, I wouldn't mind.
On the bright side,
well, you mentioned the Japanese, of course. I mean, we have a very recent story of a former prime minister being assassinated in plain view.
What's that got to do with the American bases, though?
Well, I'm saying kind of like the Japanese are kind of like, never mind what they feel about the Americans, they're kind of pretty, they have problems of their own.
Did you see that homemade shotgun he made?
Yeah, that was something else.
Yeah, I mean, these barrels that were like 3 inches wide.
Don't they have gun control there? It's like,
but a different topic. Anyway, trying very hard to get both of you back on subject here.
Not going to happen.
I'm thinking Taco Bell right now.
Me too now, actually.
KFC.
Exactly. No, I've said I'm very much against this for reasons that I've already described, so I won't get back into it. But I just saw the number 90% supported. I just think that's bizarre. But again, we'll see how it goes once the reality sets in a couple of years. Let's move on to the Matura, the high school leaving exam that all Polish high schoolers take in May. So enough time has passed to get the results, and this week we learned, we got some stats basically to kind of paint a picture of just how well people did both here locally in Krakow and all over the country. Nationally, 78% of students passed. Another 15% have, Dr. Mike, you'll have to explain this, the opportunity to retake it. What does that mean?
Well, it has to be
they failed.
No, it doesn't mean they failed necessarily.
Like the Matura is broken down into several sections, language, mathematics, et cetera, et cetera. If you only screwed up part of it, you can retake part of that in August. If you screwed up more, then you basically have to wait a year and retake it a year later. So
second chance.
Exactly. So second chance. With the Matura as well exam, people are saying like, oh, wait, 70, 80% people passed. To pass the Matura, it's 30%. That's the pass.
It's a low bar.
It's a very low bar.
But remember, the point is not to pass it. The point is to get a very good grade that impresses the university people, right?
Exactly, because this is not only a high school passing final exam, but also an entrance exam to most universities.
Here's one stat that stood out to me. Locally here in Krakow, 97% passed the English test on the Matura. Now,
which is the same percentage as passed the Polish test, funnily enough.
And higher than the percent that passed the math test. So here's
doesn't add up, does it?
Here's my question. A test that is passed by 97% of people, just by definition to me, that means it's not hard enough. I mean, how easy is this test if 97% of people pass it? And let's back up for a second. Let's be fair. High schoolers today, yes, they're much more likely to be good at English than their parents were a generation ago. Yes, they're good. They're better than ever, but they're not that good. So either the bar is pretty low, Dr. Mike, in terms of just it's way too easy, or something else is going on. What's your take on this?
It has more to do with the fact that the bar is pretty low. When you're taking the Matura, you have to choose a foreign language, at least at the preliminary kind of basic level. And most people choose English. And this level of English that you have on Matura is along the lines of like conversation. At an airport, can you find out which gate you're supposed to go to? Asking somebody who works there, you're not expecting.
Where's the library?
So along those lines,
the classic question, yes.
Long and sharp.
So the weird, the cliched standard everyday situations.
Exactly. My postilion has been struck by lightning.
So that's how low the bar is.
Yes, I mean, there are more advanced questions when it comes to grammar, but like I said, the standard to pass is quite low to begin with.
Okay.
So
how many eels in your hovercraft?
97%, that's just too high. Here's one other thing I wanted to ask you about in this article with the results. And you see this a lot. You see this anytime the Matura is discussed. They compare the results of students in Krakow to students in other cities. And they're kind of proud of the fact that the Krakow kids are better than the Wrocław kids or whatever. Yeah. Now, to me, a significant statistical variation in test results, I don't think it's a source of pride. It's a source of a question that says, why isn't it more uniform nationally? In other words, why isn't the quality of the education or the grading practices of the Matura or whatever, why isn't it more uniform? Because there shouldn't be much of a statistical difference at all. It should be almost the same.
We have a
top to bottom
education system here.
Exactly.
Like the United States,
it should be top to bottom, from one border to the other, almost basically the same, with no variation outside the margin of error. So why don't we look at stats with a little bit of skepticism rather than pride? What do you think?
I agree with you. There's something not right here, since technically the system should be the same in all regions. And the variation, if we were talking about 1 or 2%, fine, but it's sometimes 5-10% that there's
as many of them are. Yeah, it's significant statistically.
It's like, well, we're talking about the same age group, similar statistics, similar cultural background. Why are the results so varied between regions? I'm kind
of curious about the process, because just on the face of it, I refuse to believe that the kids in Krakow, for example, are just naturally smarter than the kids in Gdańsk or Wrocław or whatever.
We walk down the streets here. It's like the kids here are goddamn idiots.
However, there's a process that involves some subjective human involvement in the grading process, right? Because, as you know, some of the Matura is multiple choice. A computer can grade it, but other parts of it are subjective and graded by humans.
Flesh robots.
I think they make some effort to ship tests from one side of the country to the other to avoid local biases, just to mix things up. But something tells me that there's something in the process that can favor or disadvantage certain kids in certain years.
For me, one of the biggest issues I have with the test here is that it's actually not that many questions. I think it's 100 points right now for the Matura, and you have many questions that are several points. So you screw up one or two things, and that really shifts you one way or the other. It's like in the United States with the SATs, it's 1,600 points. It's several hours, hundreds of questions. So if you're not good in something, it kind of gets lost in the sea of other questions. So it's more of a general knowledge, kind of.
So what's the name of the big church on the main square in Krakow? You see,
I would kind of warn you against favorable comparisons with the American system, though, Dr. Mike. Based on what I know, I would kind of be careful there. I don't know if it's necessarily a better system.
The fact that the United States, the U.S., SATs, ACTs, just have more questions, and the pointage is a larger number.
Spread out.
It's exactly.
Okay.
And that allows for the fact that you generally might be a smart student, but in the U.S., if you don't know a few things, you get by. Well, in Poland, if you don't know something and that just happens to be on the test,
if you get unlucky, you can have a catastrophic score. If you get lucky, you can ace it.
If you're generally a good student, you generally do okay.
I got you. Well, let's move on to some local news here.
Interesting.
If you don't know what a Melex is, it's I always found this interesting. I don't know why they call it a Melex.
What's the name of the company?
If you live here in Krakow, or if you live in a touristy area, I think you can probably see them in certain places, maybe in Warsaw.
That Poland is the world's largest exporter of electric golf carts.
Did not know that.
Yes, they are. That's why they love their Melexes here.
Brand name Melex.
Well, just generically, we would call it a golf cart, but in Poland they call it Melex. Maybe because of the brand behind it, I don't know. But here in Krakow, they're everywhere, unfortunately, because of the tourism trade. And this is
the guy that used to have a tour bike industry.
This is a regulated. This is a regulated licensed thing because of how big they are, and because they have to park somewhere, and because of the disruption they bring to the the cityscape and whatnot. Anyway, and there are only a certain number of them allowed on the streets.
You're a big fan, I can see.
No, I'm not. But anyway, the Melex has to display their license in the front. I guess it's kind of like taped in the window. And a couple of days ago, somebody in the Straż Miejska, kind of like the city guard police force, he noticed something odd. I'm not sure exactly what, but it made him want to take a closer look. And on closer inspection, he realized that the license taped in the window was kind of a bad photocopy of the real thing. And in the place where there's a red stamp from the authorities, which is a Polish obsession, stamping everything in red, instead of the name of some bureaucrat, generic, he could have made up a name like, Jan Novak. Instead of that, he put Papa Smurf. And so in Polish, it said authorized by Papa Smurf, which is like begging for trouble, I guess. And the guy got the trouble he was begging for. Detained, lost his license. I'm not sure what's going to happen to him.
You lose a license you don't have.
Yeah, well, that's true. I'm not sure what kind of penalties he's facing at the moment. As I said, this just happened a couple of days ago. Are we?
He has to walk around holding an umbrella in the air.
Do we admire this guy for the balls he showed, or do we say how stupid can you be asking for trouble like this?
Big ball, small brain. So I don't think it compensates nonsense. If you're going to fake a license, try to make it look real, documentation, put, like you say, a regular name there, Jan Novak. Just so if this Straż Miejska walked by and okay, it looks like this bad quality, but he was like, oh, maybe the sun destroyed it, the color's wrong, I don't want to bother with this. Right. But it looks at the name, it's like Papa Smurf. Okay, no, I got to call this in.
Yeah, and I mean that can't even really be misread as being some plausible Polish. I mean, Patrick, Piotr.
Yeah, I mean, right there on the spot. I mean, the cop knows that. Okay, we got a problem here. Let's start making phone calls and But
Papa, he's my cousin.
I kind of like it, and I'll tell you why. Just as a sidebar, I've talked about my legal history here on the show before. I've spent many hours in various buildings and court-related places here in Krakow, and one of the things I had to do many times was to pick up photocopies that I asked for. And when you do this, in the office. Of course, right now, after COVID, it's probably different. But pre-COVID, the process was they had a small book, papers put together. You had to sign for it. Put the date, your name, and just your signature to confirm that you picked up these copies you asked for. And when I would go in there just to see if anybody was paying attention, I would, instead of my name, I would sign Darth Vader, King Kong, Mario, Sesame Street, just any number of other things just to see if anybody noticed. And no one ever did. I've never been questioned once. I've signed these various made-up names and stuff like this, easily 50 times, and no one has ever said a word. Not only there on the spot, or when I've returned later, no one ever said, "Hey, why did you sign this Luke Skywalker last time?"
I understand. Yeah, the police are still looking for Dave Lee Roth.
Maybe, I don't know. But in this case, he pushed it a little too far, and he's going to face the music on this.
Actually, this reminds me, was it?
And the music goes la 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 la. Sorry, what?
It just reminds me of those stories they were saying, when Poland joined the EU all those years ago, and they could drive around with Polish licenses in the UK, and those stories about I don't know how true they are.
The Irish police looking for some guy called Pravo Yazdi. Yeah. It was probably British police, but we had to pretend it was Ireland because we do that.
Let's move on from Papa Smurf to a follow-up on a story that we mentioned last week, new regulations that make it harder to cheat the ticket people when you're on buses and trams, especially trams, I guess. Previously, once you realized the ticket check was going on, you could hop on your smartphone and at least start the process of buying a ticket and at least, pretend that you had good intentions and you got caught before you were able to complete the transaction. Well, they made some changes. Now, when the ticket inspectors get on a tram or a bus, they can disable the application, or at least for that specific bus or tram that you're on, making it impossible, so you basically get caught without a ticket. Well, the MPK, which is the organization that runs the public transport, they're getting feedback from this. People are not happy for a couple of reasons. They say that, not everybody who wants to buy a ticket after boarding the tram is trying to cheat. How many times have you run, for example, to catch a bus or tram, and you hop on and, you're not trying to cheat anybody, but you need a minute before you can take out your phone, and maybe you're with a child and you have to get them situated before you can get the process started. So it kind of assumes you have, criminal intent before, if you don't have a ticket when you get on the tram, which is not fair.
Actually,
what do we think about that?
You just reminded me of a thing that I'd forgotten about. This was a few weeks ago, and I got on a tram, and I went to the ticket machine on the tram to buy a ticket, but they were kind of controllers there, and they were obviously interviewing somebody, shall we say, or kind of, and I wasn't able to get to the ticket machine, and sort of they were talking with this person, and this person was, doing the usual routine of fumbling through their bag and I have a ticket somewhere, I'm sure, I just can't quite. And then they get to the next stop, and of course this person is ushered off, and I sort of. So then I went and sat down, and I would been waiting all this time to go to the machine and buy a ticket. And by the time they finally got off with this suspect, I'd completely forgotten and just sat down and took the rest of the journey without a ticket.
Happens.
Yeah. It happens. No, but I remember once, I wouldn't say yelling, but there was an American tourist on a tram arguing with the controllers about, but I wanted to buy a ticket, but I couldn't get to the machine in time. And he was being, honestly, quite aggressive and vulgar. It's like
an American, really.
I always buy tickets and like that. I remember the controllers are like, "No, sir, but you have to." Blah, blah. And I basically told them, "Sir," I told the guy, "Look, when you're getting on the tram, it's your responsibility to have a ticket."
Oh, you had to get involved.
No, he started swearing out loud, acting like.
Okay, that's fair.
For me, it's there's that certain point where, yeah, I know, dude, it sucks, but yeah, okay, it sucks.
Don't be a dick.
But yeah, he was being a huge dick. And I basically said, "Look. Yeah, it sucks, but it's your responsibility as a passenger to either have a ticket when you get on or get one as soon as possible. The fact that there are machines there are more on the lines of giving you a second chance in case you didn't have
Okay, fair enough, but what about the example I gave? A woman with a kid or two has to get them situated, and the tram is moving, but she's still not in a position to get the ticket yet, but she's going to. She will. She's got a 20-30-minute tram ride ahead of her. She thinks she has plenty of time, but surprise, the check is now. What about her?
She had a lot of chances to buy tickets before then.
Ooh, cold-hearted.
I'm not saying. I'm not
you
saying
are harsh, Mike.
But I'm saying the ticket machine on the tram is kind of like a stopgap, a last. But you can't count on it. You'll be traveling.
So should she have seen the tram, but realizing she didn't have a ticket, instead of waited there at the stop in the rain, in the cold, in the snow, bought a ticket and waited for the next one, according to you?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, but she could have bought it. She could have bought extra tickets earlier. She could have bought.
She should have bought a whole load of tickets at the beginning of the month.
Where's the love, Mike?
There's a lot of options she had before then.
Or a season ticket. I mean, exactly. I mean, there are really no excuses.
So once you get on the tram, you don't have a ticket, then you're at the point where, okay, I hope I have enough time to buy a ticket, but this is my last chance.
Well, then why offer tickets?
You're basically committing a felony.
Why offer tickets on the tram at all?
Just for that reason. So
I mean, it used to be before they had machines, you could buy one off the driver, but it was more expensive than buying it at the stop because the driver
very
doesn't
expensive,
have change.
And you got a ton of attitude as well.
Because it's a full-time job, like pointing at
with no change. You have change? No, never.
I remember a friend of mine once told me that he had tourists from out of town, out of Poland coming in, and he explained to them, okay, you get on the tram, if you walk up to the tram driver and say, bilet proszę, and he gave this sentence to the guest, and the guest said they got on the tram with money in their hand. They walked up to the driver and they started, in bad Polish saying the statement out loud. The driver just looked at them funny. Next stop, never stop. They're holding their money out there. They finally get off on their stop without buying a ticket, and they're wondering, why did this tram driver not sell them a ticket? It's not like he sells anything else. When somebody walks up to you with money in their hand and starts,
there's no room for confusion there.
Not like, they're asking for a Snickers bar or a hand job. No, you're probably just selling tram tickets.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if in days gone by you go up to the cab of a tram and in addition to the ticket machine, there would be rolls of Andrex and fluffy toys and packets of cigarettes and chocolate bars, like the little kiosks you get at the tram stops.
A new way for Empika to make some more money.
Soap powder.
Let's go to the airport, the Krakow Airport, which this week took a rather unusual step on their Facebook page of publicly communicating their apologies for recent criticisms about the slow speed of the security checkpoints, the where you go before you get to the departure part, the part where you open your bags and put everything on the belts and whatnot. Security cameras, et cetera, et cetera. Apparently, a lot of criticism about the average wait time. And again, they took their Facebook page to say, sorry about this. We're doing the best we can. Guys, this is interesting because the first thing I'm thinking when I read this is that it's almost certainly not their fault, the airport's fault, that security times are up. It's almost certainly the passengers' fault. But they have to apologize to the passengers anyway.
I agree with that it's more likely to be the fault of the passengers, especially in Poland where we didn't have much in the way of people, being fired from security. The airports were still running fully staffed during COVID, unlike in other countries where they were getting rid of, 10, 20% of the staffing, and now they're rehiring them back and nobody wants to work there anymore.
When I see the security at the Krakow Airport, they're always like, hey, come on, next, let's go. They're very efficient. They're very, even more than efficient,
For
actually.
me, sometimes the biggest problem is I want to be more prepared when I walk up there. There isn't enough table space before. So, I want to take off my jacket and my belt and be more or less ready. And, everything in my backpack is ready to just pull out my liquids, pull out my...
They could make what's that little thing with the roller bars on it? They could make it longer on the first side.
Especially in winter when you're wearing a lot of coats and stuff, I need space just to prepare. And now I literally walk up.
I can add to that because at Easter I went to the UK and that was the first time I'd flown in 3.5 years. And... I didn't have to wait very long at security in Krakow Airport. And as I was standing in line, I realized that years of having a little routine of kind of putting this in these pockets and this in this bag so that, by the time you get to the conveyor belt, you just kind of go boom, 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 and you're straight. And I'm like, I can't remember what it is you're supposed to do, really. And not only did it take me a long time to get ready to go through, but I also had about 20 minutes at the other side, just putting jackets on and shoes on and belts on and coins back in pockets.
The worst feeling.
And it was I just completely forgotten the whole drill. And I suspect that, never mind your first-time travellers who've never had to do it ever. There's people who've just, lost the habit.
Yeah, but think about it. I mean, when you're going through security here at the Krakow Airport, which is more likely, that you look at the security staff and they're moving slowly and chatting amongst themselves and ignoring their jobs, or the person in front of you is waiting until the very last minute to do everything, or they have to be told, yes, take off your belt.
Yeah,
take off
that's
your shoes,
a rhetorical question, isn't it?
Yes, you do have to take your laptop out of your bag into a separate bin.
No, sir, you can keep your pants on.
And Well, answering questions like, well, I can't bring this gallon jug of some whatever. Look, why not?
Well, where do I put my shotgun?
Is this your knife, sir? Yeah. You can't bring a knife on. Why not? I mean, which is more likely? I think that's more likely is passengers who are uncooperative or just ignorant. I mean, it reminds me of many, many years ago literally in a different century. I worked at a movie theater, and it reminds me of the busy nights. This is back when cinemas were busy on Friday and Saturdays, unlike today, where people would stand in line at the concession stand to buy popcorn and stand in line for 15, 20 minutes or more. They'd finally get up to the front where I was working. They talked to me, and they would look up at the menu and go like, let me see here. They've been standing in line for 20 minutes, and that's when they choose to decide what they want, is when they're talking to me.
Sorry, John, what was the choice available at the popcorn stand?
Popcorn or nachos, or those different. We had candy, the usual stuff, I guess. But it's like I just wanted to yell at them. You've been standing here for 20 minutes, and now you're going to walk away and complain about how long you had to spend waiting for this.
Supermarket checkouts, Biedronka, counting change, putting your shopping in the bag.
Same thing. So the airport apologizes, but I think it's not their fault. I think, again, from what I've seen, unless they are understaffed, Mike, which I'm sure they're fixing as fast as possible, I think it's just the people are just. Remember how these are the same people that are gonna once they get on the other side of the security check, they're going to take their boarding pass, which says, for example, seat 8F, and they're going to walk down the aisle with a look of confusion on their face, wondering where on the plane that 8F is hidden. Could it be right between 7 and 9? I don't know. Maybe it's at the back of the plane. These are the same people that cause the problems with security. So
let me hold my bag up against my head and thrust it in front of everybody.
It's the most frustrating experience I can.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, and this is statistically correct, but 50% of people are below average intelligent.
I believe that. Have to be. And just one more thing. As airports go, I mean, you want to complain about the Krakow Airport? I mean, I think they've done a very good job of scaling up. They've grown a lot in the last few years. I mean, sure, there can be hiccups along the way, but I mean, I think of all the delays I've ever had, all the frustrating encounters I've ever had, none of them have happened here.
I think this last flight I got, departing from Krakow, I actually walked from the terminal to the steps to the plane. I didn't even have to get on this, pathetic bus that goes like 20
Sometimes
minutes.
They do that, yeah, if you're right up front.
Oh, that's the best, because the bus is annoying, especially when you have priority boarding on one of those low-cost airlines.
Yeah, you pay all that extra and you don't get any advantage.
You go downstairs and you're just waiting longer to be the first person there. It's like, well, this kind of sucked. But I think Krakow Airport scaled up quite nicely when they expanded a few years ago. The one thing they didn't do well, at least in my opinion, is that the far end, like the gate 16, 17, 18, they didn't put enough space there for those flights, which are often international flights with larger planes. So they have a plane with 200, 300 people on it, and there's only seating or space there for 40. And it gets very uncomfortable. It's like, you guys were building up this airport. You knew this. Add an extra 2 rows there, an extra 5 meters of space. It's like you're investing 150 million. What's an extra 200,000 zlotys here?
You know the concept of ZIL lanes? You heard about this? Like, this is a Soviet thing where, like in Moscow, you have the big highways going and like terrible traffic jams, but there is one lane.
Oh, yeah, for the party,
which is for the
leadership, right?
Yeah, for the whatever.
Do you want something like that at the airport?
Isn't that what priority boarding is?
Higher class people like yourself?
ZIL lane. Yeah.
Okay. If I got to choose one thing, all right, I'll go back on my own. I love Krakow Airport, but I'll go back on my own opinion for one thing. I think they could do a faster job of getting luggage off the plane onto the belt when you arrive here. It can take half an hour sometimes, and I realize it's a tough job. Somebody's got to crawl. God knows what it looks like in the hull of these planes. But I mean, the plane is literally like
it's like medieval in there.
The plane, it is. The plane is like it's like 200 meters away. This is not like Frankfurt or JFK or Heathrow or something. I don't know why it takes so long to get the baggage out.
In their defense, I think that there's like just certain things that take a certain amount of time. Like the distance doesn't matter, because once you get off the plane, if that what's it called, if it's 200 meters or 700 meters, that's not really a big deal. There's just a procedure putting it on this belt, that belt, moving it around. Just Krakow is a small airport, so there's a passenger once you get off the plane through border security. It's literally 15 minutes. While at Luton or in Heathrow or in Chicago, just that takes you 30 minutes. which is basically the amount of time it takes them to get the baggage from the plane.
I think that's a very excellent point, actually.
My time is valuable, Mike. I don't have time to still wait for my bag. I need to go.
Let's go through large airports then, where it takes you longer.
I got stuff to do.
To get carousels.
Do you know who I am?
I have couches to sit on when I get home. What else we got here? COVID cases, quick return to the world of COVID. We learned this week that COVID cases are up 60% in Poland, and the absolute number of cases is roughly similar or even higher than it was a year ago when we were all panicking about it. We've got more COVID going on now, but almost zero panic. We've moved on to other news stories and other things to worry about, I guess.
Well, I think it's mainly because, people have COVID in the sense that they may be coughing a little bit and they have a positive test, but they're not actually ill, or at least they're not, ill to the extent of needing to be hospitalized.
You got weaker strains now, Dr. Mike, or something like that? Or what?
It's not only that, we have become more accustomed to it, socially speaking. I wouldn't say it's on par with the flu right now, but so many people have known so many people that have had COVID and seen that. Yes, I've experienced some people that have had worse encounters of COVID, but generally speaking, it's fine. And for me, it's more peculiar that it's popping up now in the media, though it's been quiet the last couple of months. The numbers have been going up and down. If you want to look at them, they're there. But for some reason, the last 2 weeks, the topic has come back. Even though, like you say, 60% higher. But yeah, if it's 60%, but of a number that was low to begin with, so it's gone from 3 to 5. That's not that big of a deal. We're kind of in that ballpark right now, and most people just don't care. They're not that concerned.
We're over it.
We're pretty much over it.
Are hospitals, are they still in any way on kind of like a war footing when it comes to, prepared for floods of patients?
They haven't been for months now.
No.
One of the main issues during COVID was mismanagement in hospitals, that they were preparing for something major, so they're shutting down other wards, limiting contact, and expecting, literally Ebola and Walking Dead kind of scenarios. And yes, there were bad things happening, but they were putting too many resources in one area without resources in other areas. And
we must be seeing the consequences of that now. People who did not get certain, examinations or surgeries because the resources were allocated to COVID.
Now, like where I work, which is more connected with insurance, we noticed the last 2 years that the number of procedures for cardiology, oncology, or just screening and testing was dramatically down. We're not talking 5-10%, we're talking 80% lower. These people didn't disappear. We're going to be seeing, a bounce back in the next year or two of people who didn't get treatment earlier coming in now. It's not, people didn't stop dying from heart attacks and cancer during this period of time, but it wasn't happening for some reason. That means something is amiss. And we're going to be seeing the consequences of that in the next couple of months or years.
Let's bring things back local here. Again, this is something we mentioned last week. Regulations that went into effect on July 1st say that most types of billboards and advertisements are no longer allowed. They were torn down all over the city. Last week we talked about how some of the billboards that were torn down revealed like a homeless encampment right next to the Galeria Krakowska. But generally speaking, I think, people are not going to argue with this. The city does look better. But one curious effect that we're not sure how to solve going forward is that the kind of billboards that you see on the side of busy roads, the kind that were not mounted on buildings, they were mounted on, purpose-built, what do you call them? There's a metal post and a frame that holds the billboard, those things. The infrastructure for billboards, in other words, is still there. Right, that's still there. And, those are actually kind of investments. I kind of know something about this. I knew somebody who worked in the advertising industry. There's a company called Clear Channel, which dominates it globally. I don't know why. I think it's an American company. And they bought up kind of local and regional players. And, they pay the landowner for that piece of property. They pay a kind of rent. Although it's a very small footprint on the ground, but, they're erecting some kind of, very, very visible thing on their property. And that thing is still there, even if it's not holding a billboard. So, guys, I'm wondering, when the government implemented this law, and I know it was a couple of years ago, so the industry had time to adjust, they were kind of breaking into, private contracts that media companies had with businesses that wanted to advertise that, basically the government saying, no, whatever agreement you had ends on July 1st because the billboard can't exist anymore. That's the first question. How do we deal with that going forward? And also, Dr. Mike, what about these? There must be tens of thousands of them. Well, maybe locally, let's put it in the thousands, not tens of thousands, but a lot of these things everywhere that are maybe not as ugly as billboards, but they look kind of out of place now since they can't hold a billboard. And what do we do with those?
I think it really depends on exactly how these advertising companies worked out their deals with the owners of the property there. If they bought that little 2 square meter plot of land and then bought up that infrastructure, then then the city has to walk up to them and say, like, okay, you've got this eyesore here, you need to do something with it. And they'll say, like, well, it's not an advertisement anymore, so screw you, we don't have to do anything about it.
And removing it is going to cost serious money. These
exactly.
are huge things.
If it's rented property, though, as in they rented the area, then the owner of the property can say, okay, you are no longer renting. If you're renting property for me, I don't care if there's an ad there or not, you're still paying for that 2 square meters a month. And if you want to stop renting that property, you have to take the infrastructure that you built there. It's just like if you, say, rent out property to start a restaurant somewhere and you put up, there's, I don't know, tables, lights, and everything like that. You can't just leave that there walking away. You have to take that with you if there's any type of permanent infrastructure that you built. So I'm curious to see how this is going to work out. But I think a lot of those will be coming down because all of them were not on property that was owned by the advertising company, but rented from other owners.
Is there a workaround for brands to get their image out there? I mean, another way, billboards are a fact of life. Sorry, I mean, they don't make things look prettier, but there's too much at stake here. I mean, now that everything's been reset, there are incentives to be the first person out there, the first brand, I should say, to get your name back out there and visible to car traffic and city traffic and whatnot. Is there a way to kind of follow the letter of the law while follow the letter, violate the spirit? Yeah.
I'm assuming that there must be ways, but they just, for some reason, haven't really experimented on it. First of all, if I'm a property owner, I can stick stuff in my window as long as it's not on the facade of the building. So that's one way. So it could be in the window in advertisement, but not actually stuck in the building, though that's, of course, less visible on the street. Some kind of, say, lighting. Like, you ever walk past clubs and bars that just shine a light on the sidewalk of their name of the bar or club? I can imagine something like that being more often.
As long as we're cracking down on advertisements, can we do something about the problem of these people who stuff your mailbox with pizza ads and I will buy your apartment ads and bank?
I've had that in my elevator. I walk in and there's like those little rip off a phone number kind of things. Like I need a parking space or a number.
That's more irritating than billboards ever were to me. But
6578309.
Any thoughts, Josh?
Not really.
Thank you, Josh. But I will go back to you for this, our last item today. We got word that this is under my radar. We're going to talk about Spanish food. Apparently, an authority with some credibility, because they're based in Spain, they say that Krakow is home to one of the best Spanish restaurants in all of Europe, apparently.
Yeah, and indeed the world.
Indeed the world. Now, tell us about this. What's this restaurant called? And Spanish food.
Yeah, the restaurant is called Struggles to...
So you can edit out this pause of silence and say it.
Well, I could, but I think I'll leave it in there.
Called El Pollo Loco or Pollos Hermanos.
Yeah. Something like Escaudis or something like that.
It means the Basque people.
Well, yes, it's actually really it's hysterical because it's not actually Spanish. It's Basque.
It's the people who don't want to be part of Spain.
Yes, yeah, and not the Catalonians either, who also don't want to be part of Spain. But that's another story.
So maybe this is more accurately a Basque restaurant than a Spanish restaurant. I had no idea what Basque food is all about. Very little idea what Spanish. Educate me on Spanish food.
Chicken in the basket. No, I don't.
They like beef.
Spanish, it's like jamón, which is Spanish for ham.
Okay.
And huevos, which is eggs.
Okay.
There was a good Spanish restaurant
bacon,
back in the day on
which is bacon.
Everybody eats ham and eggs, though. Come on.
I think it was, and I remember that it was called El Toro.
Tortilla.
On Plaza Volnica a few years back, which is a really nice restaurant. Really liked a lot of the meals there. Nice and meaty and like aromatic, kind of spicy food. But yeah, it's like when you think Spanish food, it's like tortilla, like it's just a big...
Well, there's a lot of crossover with...
paella, of course, I guess, is the closest there is to being a sort of like a nationally identified dish.
But how is it that Latin American food, there's a lot of, obviously cultural ties and parallels with Spain, Latin American food is a thing, Spanish food, it really isn't. Their neighbors in France and Italy, exported their culinary culture around the world.
Because I think they're better cooks, probably.
Spain did not, even though Spain
no, but I mean, I think the great Spanish food export over the years has been this idea of tapas, which are, little kind of savoury snacks that you have to accompany your drink. I mean, in the sense, they have their priorities right. The drink is important, and then a little bit of a nibble to go along with it.
Salty food makes you want to drink more, and the circle is complete.
And like kind of. I mean, it's not just like ham and types of ham or olives and cheese and stuff. I mean, there are cooked things like meatballs, for example, in a rich tomato sauce, or prawns are also lots of seafood things.
I'm still thinking of Taco Bell right now with the U.S.
Patatas bravas.
God, that's a beef culture too, isn't it? Spain. Do you think?
Oh yeah, they like to slaughter their beef in front of tens of thousands of people and eat it. So yeah, I think so.
I think they're more into humiliating the poor bastards rather than eating them.
Whatever.
As long as we're on the topic here, as I mentioned, the French and the Italians obviously exported their cuisine culture. Other countries have somewhat of a familiar culture, although to a lesser extent. I'm thinking, the Germans,
China.
The Germans and their European, the Germans and their sausages. Who else? But there are a lot of countries.
Danish and their bacon.
A lot of countries where it's just a question mark.
Swiss cheese,
when
chocolate.
you think about them in, apart from one product, okay, but I would have to include, Ireland, for example. What they're famous for? What again? The Scandinavians might have their weird pickled fish.
Oh yeah, their stinky rotting fish.
Yeah, that's kind of gross. But I mean, the Hungarians, they have a unique cuisine.
That's it.
Where are you going with this, John?
Well, I'm going like okay, you can
deep fried Mars bars,
French restaurant, Italian restaurant, easy. You could make a Hungarian restaurant, easy.
Yeah.
Could you have, for example, a Finnish restaurant? Could you have a?
But you wouldn't be in business for very long.
That's what I'm getting at. Why is it that some countries just have so little to offer they can't even fill a menu?
Well, I mean, what's hilarious, of course, is the people who've had a go at opening like fish and chip shops here in Poland, and it just, with the best of intentions, it just doesn't happen, does it? Which is a shame. I mean, I love classic, British fish and chips, but it does have to be, in that particular style, and it's not just any old fish and a few French fries, in that McDonald's way. It's got to be British-style fish and chips.
Open an Austrian restaurant and see what happens. Good luck.
Crickets.
How about the Portuguese? Have they got anything to share?
Oh, yeah, Portuguese. Well, there's Nando's, which is from South Africa, but that is a Portuguese kind of spicy chicken.
Okay.
I've been to a few Portuguese restaurants in London. They're very, very nice. It's more less seafood-oriented than anything else. And salted cod. Everything is with salted cod.
Salted cod, yeah. Which is delicious.
Romania, Bulgaria. Sorry, guys, you got nothing for you. But Spain. Interesting. Never thought about that. I don't know what a Spanish restaurant looks like. No, apparently, you don't either.
Well, at least I've been there.
Okay, then you should know. Then did you eat?
Well,
when
I
you
do.
were there?
I've been in.
Did you eat when you were there?
You were asking me, and I was giving you a long list of Spanish foods.
Okay, so
were you not paying attention?
Okay, let's go through the not like random. Here's a paella. Here's a tapas. Like for your main dishes, give me your top 3 or 4 main dishes on a menu in a Spanish restaurant.
Well, I mean, if you like your steak, barely not mooing, then Spain is a good country to go. Okay. When you ask for a rare steak, it's still beating, Okay.
And
well, I mean, omelette, of course, Spanish omelette, which is made with eggs and Spanish.
Is that a dinner dish?
It's a tortilla, and it's completely different from a Mexican tortilla because it's like an omelette with potatoes and onions, and it's cooked on both sides, and it's about an inch thick. Well, 2.5 centimetres for our metric brethren.
Okay. All right.
Delicious.
All right. That's it?
No, of course, there's lots more. I mean,
that you could mention, but you're not for some reason.
I mentioned a whole load earlier, but you
mentioned paella and tapas, and
I mentioned some specific tapas. So, the things like the meatballs and.
All right, let's leave it. Anyway, if you want to try some, what is apparently some like the
Doritos,
the real thing, like really good Spanish food. Just Google Spanish restaurant Krakow, since Josh can't find the tab he was looking at earlier.
We're definitely not going to get a free meal there.
By the way,
it's somewhere in Podgorza.
It's on Podgorza on Brodzińskiego. In Podgorza for the real thing. So that brings us to the end of another news. Thanks for listening, KrakCast.pl. All of our back episodes are there. We've got kind of a dialed back summertime schedule at the moment. We're not publishing as much as we usually do because, well...
Is dialed back like an anagram of laid back?
Dialed, almost, but not quite. There's an extra E in there, I think. But anyway, so on behalf of Interrupting Josh and Quiet Dr. Mike, this is John saying thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the news.